Okay, we're going to start this meeting. We call this meeting to order. If you would all please stand and remove your hats for the Pledge of Allegiance, and then remain standing for a moment of silence, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you guys very much. I do appreciate that. Okay. Moving right along, we will have roll call. Donna, please.
Mayor Queenie Bars.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brenda.
Here.
Trustee Ed Allen.
Here.
Trustee Bethany Harrison.
Here.
Trustee Denise Bryan.
Here.
Trustee Cindy Stinson.
Here.
Trustee Martin Porter.
Okay, we do have a quorum, so we will continue. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda, and I will entertain a motion.
I can make a motion to approve the agenda, please.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Fred Brooks and a second by Trustee Betsy Harrison to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sound. Motion carries. Next is the approval of the minutes of the September 22nd, 2021 meeting. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of September 22nd meeting. Second.
And we have a motion by Trustee Denise Bryan and a second by Trustee Betsy Harrison to approve the minutes of September 22nd, 2021 as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sound. Motion carries. Next on the agenda is audience business. And so during audience business, this is your chance to speak up and talk. And you have 5 minutes, and be aware that no decision will be made on what you're talking about. I do have a Corey Jabor. And if you would please come up and state your name and address for the
Corey Jabor. It's Jabour. 207 North Main. That's where I live.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. I came to discuss the flag a little bit. I work for the Farmington Fire Department. I'm on the color guard there. I've been in the fire service for over 15 years as a volunteer and as a career. And I know, like, some of the things that are happening politically. The thing that bothers me is when we take a small group of people and their actions and then use that to define something like the American flag. The American flag is the most widely recognized symbol in the world for freedom. And it has been that way for quite some time. Over the last 10 years, people, when they're fighting against oppression, they flew flags in Havana, Hong Kong, Kosovo, Kurdistan. Like, anytime they're trying to say, hey, we don't like this, we don't want to be here, we want something different. Our flag is what they fly. That is the symbol of everybody. It doesn't matter which side you're on. The flag doesn't have a side. The flag itself has meaning. The colors have meaning. The white is purity and innocence, red is hardness and valor, blue is vigilance, perseverance, and justice. On June 17, 1777, the Continental Congress passed the act establishing the official flag for the nation. It was the first version of that flag. For 244 years, that flag has represented the best in us. If we choose to see the worst in ourselves or in our neighbors, that is our problem. That's subjective, right? My view of what somebody is doing will be different than anybody else's view on what that person is doing. A lot of the times, your views are the same. When we see somebody committing a heinous crime, we all basically have the same opinion. Hey, you shouldn't do that, that's really bad, right? But there are a lot of things in the world that are open to opinion. How you interpret that, or how you choose to see that, is your choice. I can choose to see the best of people, and I can choose to see the worst of them. I have known Sergeant Ray long before he was in law enforcement. I know his intentions and the intentions of the marshal's office were very pure. I fly a flag on the back of a fire engine. We fly them on police cars. We fly them in Humvees, AMRAPs, tanks, you name it. That is a pride thing. That is ownership, and it means that we stand for that and everything it means. The definition of a patriot, because I've heard that used, and I get it, words change, sometimes meaning change, but Merriam-Webster's definition of a patriot: one who loves and supports his or her country. Dictionary.com: a person who loves, supports, defends his or her country and its interests with devotion. Oxford Languages: a person who vigorously supports their country and is prepared to defend it against enemies or detractors. All of them basically say the same thing. The problem is whether the word is positive or negative is a matter of opinion. That's just based on your view. But that doesn't change what that flag means. Nobody in this country should be scared of that flag. That hurts me. That disappoints me. The reality is that that flag flies in every public building, every educational institution. It's part of the U.S. Flag Code. Title 4 of the United States Code, Chapter 1. The flag should be hoisted briskly, sir. Honestly, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes in, how to do it. You don't do it in inclement weather, which you're talking about in the workshop, unless it's an all-weather flag. There's an entire list of holidays in the flag code when the flag should be flown. And then the flag should be displayed daily on or near the main administration building of every public institution. The flag should be displayed in or near every polling place on election days. The flag should be displayed during school days in or near every schoolhouse. These rules have been in place. They've been modified over the years. Okay? But the flag code has been around for over a century. The last major modification was in 1956. To me, I understand, I understand that there's different views, and I get that. Everybody's entitled to that. That's what makes us great, right? We are not all going to agree. The reality is, if everybody was the same, we'd all be dead. It takes different people with different opinions and different views to make things work. But the actions of a few people, and if you're looking at the deal that's going on in Cortez, 20, 30, 40, 50 people, there's 8,000 people in Cortez, there's 23,000 or something in Montezuma County. Is that representative of the majority view? My answer would be no. If they're breaking the law while flying the flag, doing things, I haven't seen it. But if they're blocking traffic, that's a law enforcement issue. Stop them. So.
Corey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for your opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, did anybody else want to speak that didn't sign up? Okay, then we will move right along to announcements. Heather, do you have any announcements?
I do have a couple of announcements. We're starting after the triple in up until 5:22. So, we have a reminder that we have our second round of communication training, mandatory communication training on October 21st from 8:30 to 4. And you will have a Zoom option, and we'll send that to you. I will be out of the office Monday, Tuesday. I'm flying into Denver Sunday, flying back Wednesday. So I will have limited access to email. No access to my phone on Tuesday, but just so you all know. Stewards of Children training is scheduled for you all in the community center on October 23rd at 9 a.m. at Cindy Rose Peace. Region 9, so Mancos has been nominated as a Community of the Year in a small category. Rachel and Laura for Region 9 and Shaq from Montezuma County, because Montezuma County is also nominated. They are presenting the award during the Economic Development Summit. So Rachel is attending on behalf of the town as our Economic Development Coordinator. I will keep you posted, but I did want to let you know that we were nominated. It's the Economic Development Council of Colorado is who nominated Mancos and Montezuma County. Region 9 received a National Impact Award for their business relief program coordination during COVID-19. Laura wanted me to pass this along because it was in large part because of how Montezuma County, Mancos, Cortez, and Dolores coordinated on the small business grant funding and working with Region 9 on that. So they did receive the National Impact Award for Business Relief Program Coordination. So thank you all for allowing that collaboration to happen. We appreciate that. We are trying to plan a board-to-board workshop with the school district. It's tentatively set for November 15th at 5 p.m. here at Town Hall. Todd is going to confirm one more time with his board and he'll get back to me so we will get an official notice. But I do want to say, if you could save the date on that one. And then, I wanted to let you know that we never, Betsy, thank you for bringing this to my attention. We have our dark sky ordinances, but we never applied for the international dark sky designation. So I reached out to Ridgewood because they do have this designation. And I thought, oh, I'll work on this. And then their town manager let me know that it's a 2-year process and it requires extensive public meeting, community engagement. So I wanted to bring this to you all. If it was just something like we could do an application and stuff, I would have just run with it and said, hey, I'm doing this. But a 2-year commitment is something that I want to run by you all. And maybe we can talk about this at another workshop, or you guys can think about it, because maybe we can talk about this when we talk about our work plan update, so that we can all say yes, no, or maybe. But I wanted to put it on your radar and know that the town never did apply for the designation, and if we want to, we can. It's a 2-year process. So be thinking about that, because when we have our work plan and financial update discussion, hopefully at the next meeting or the first meeting in November, depending on the agenda, this will be on there so I can get consensus from you all as to if you want me to spend my time on it and how you like me to prioritize.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Is there something that we could read to see what that is really involved?
Yes, what I'll do is I'll email it all to you, and then I will also include it in the board packet for public transparency. I'll put that in the board packet as well when I put the work plan and the financial policies on the agenda. So I'll make sure that I get it to you guys ahead of whatever meeting we get it on.
Great.
So that everybody can see that, and it gets posted on the website. So we can do that. Do you have anything else?
I was asked to hand out medals at the finish line for the youth in the Cowboy half marathon this weekend. So Marshall's office will be there to be present, handing out medals to the youth runners.
Nice. Good.
Great.
Great. I had left here on my desk, this is from the Montezuma League of Women Voters. There's enough books here for all board members. It's continuing education about the women's fight for the vote. So I will put these here if anybody's interested in those. They can take those.
Can I have one in your trustee library? I put one in yours.
Okay. And when I attended the CML, some of you listened to it. There was one of the motivational speakers gave his hero speech, and he is one of the Zoom classes that you can listen to. I did buy each of you guys a book with his speech, and I forgot him tonight, so I apologize, I will bring those all to you at the next meeting, if not before, I'll get them to you. Really, really motivating and a good book, and so I bought all of you guys a book.
Thank you.
So I
Thank
will
you.
give that to you. Okay, anybody else have any
I do,
announcements?
I have an announcement. Well, I have a request that I thought maybe we should put on the agenda. I had a meeting with Gretchen Rank at the Conservation District last week. And of course, our conversation segued from what we were originally going to talk about to water. And we've been having so much discussion about water and the watershed and so on. And she mentioned the fact that they are discussing, they would like to hire a watershed coordinator. And they can't do it by themselves, but they thought maybe there could be some collaboration with the town. And the reason I thought about it is because apparently there's a lot of grants out there for urban water projects. And I know that we have issues with drainage and other things, and I thought, since we're talking budget, you know, I don't know really what's entailed or what the amount of money would be, but I think it's worth talking about a collaboration with the conservation on that, conservation district.
What about if I put that on the first workshop in November? Because that's the next time you guys will talk about budget. And not a lot, I don't anticipate a lot changing between what we're introducing tonight and the next meeting. So we could potentially have Gretchen come outline what she wants.
That would be
how much
great.
she's looking for, and we can do that in a budget workshop. So does that work for you all?
And I would suggest that those of you that did attend some of the Zoom classes, virtual classes from CML, there is 2 classes. There's one on the wildfires, which affect our watersheds, and then there's another one on protecting our, where we get our water, our head gates. So if we look at those 2 classes before this, then we have a little bit maybe more input. And Fred, you had something.
I meet with Gretchen tomorrow at 8:30 and I'll talk to her about that and see if we can firm up November 1st.
Not November 1st, the first workshop.
Oh, okay.
And piggybacking on Betsy's conversation, I did meet with Gretchen as well, and you guys may be seeing the grant application. DOLA allows planning funding to be used for design charrettes and contract documents and that type of thing to allow housing collaboration between taxing entities. So Conservation District has a piece of property that they would like to build a fourplex on. We have the ability to apply to DOLA for an administrative cleaning grant. So Gretchen and I are talking about that, because ultimately we all know we need housing, but the town doesn't at the end want to be in the property management or real estate business. So
does the I mean, it seems odd that they would be in that. I mean, you're saying it's not where we want to be, but why would the conservation district want to be in the housing business?
Because there's a need.
Well, I understand the need, but
There's a need and they have a big lot, and then I think Gretchen mentioned that there'd be some allocation for like agricultural workers and affordable housing.
Well, I don't, if we want to talk about this, I can put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that this is what I'm kind of working on, and you may see it on a future agenda. If that's the direction we decide to go, we may be asking the board to authorize planning group collaboration.
See, there's not anything under statute that says we can't do that. And we've had some of the ag people in the valley have wanted to have affordable housing for some of their employees. And God knows it's needed in town also.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of a far stretch for what they normally do. That's all. It's just
They're
surprising.
spreading their wings, and for the betterment of the town, we hope. Okay, next on the agenda is the treasurer's report, September bills and claims. And does anybody have any questions or?
I move we approve the bills and claims as presented by staff.
Second?
So we have a motion by trustee Cindy Simpson and a second by trustee Betsy Harrison to approve the bills and claims as presented. Donna, would you call the vote, please?
Yes. Trustee Denise Bryan,
Aye.
trustee Italian,
Aye.
trustee Cindy Simpson.
Aye.
Trustee Betsy Harrison,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Frederick.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. And just for the audience, you know why I call the roll on that is because of the dollar amount. The other ones, I would just do just the ayes. It's not talking about money. Next on the agenda is our committee reports. First is Region 9. And I do have a report here from Rachel. She was not able to attend, so I'm going to read this real fast. It says, board member elections and term limit update. Currently, there is a vacancy for the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe, the town of Rico, and the city of Durango on the Region 9 board. Financial statements were approved through August 31st, 2021. They expect revenues to be higher when they close out the year in September, as it will include quarterly invoices to loan funds and grant payments. They have made several loans to small businesses over the quarter and have had to write off just a few. Additionally, the budget for the next fiscal year was approved. They selected a new auditor after a careful selection process. They have signed an engagement letter to conduct Region 9's audit for the year ending September 30th, 2021. They have some operating reserves, which they are reinvesting in their SCAPE program and also hiring a grant writer to help support communities who lack the capacity. Significant staff time has been spent learning about available funding opportunities being made available through various state and federal agencies. Laura Lewis Marchino is convening area governments around opioid settlement dollars and efforts to move forward to fill the gaps around substance and mental health treatment gaps. We are still waiting to see if they receive congressional designated funding for the inpatient resource feasibility study will come through, but pursuing other funding options, including requesting some matching funds from some governments. Region 9 helped promote OEDIT and EDCC's economic development operating grants with applications from our county level economic development groups. Laura is on the selection committee and thus Region 9 did not apply. Housing is a top concern in the region, and the Region 9 staff continues to explore ways they can help without creating duplication. There is a new 5-county housing study just released that was done in partnership with Housing Solutions and the Southwest COG. SBDC presentation, they gave an update that included their impact in 2021 as well as plans for 2022. CEDS, Economic Development Planning, Heather Otter, the board passed a resolution to approve and adopt the 2021 Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy 5-year document. The CEDS has been updated and must be approved by the Region 9 board for submission to EDA. The document is required per our Economic Development District status, and there's a direct link if anybody wants to look at that. San Juan Developments Association, SJDA, Recovery Coordinator Beth Kermer has been doing an amazing job in the 6 months since she started. She has launched their website, updated SJDA vision, mission, bylaws, and has participated on several regional initiatives, including High Alpine Resiliency Roadmap, coordinated a housing information meeting, and secured several grants for SJDA and the community. And Dolores County Development is an all-volunteer economic development group with strong staff, support from the CSU Extension Office and Region 9 Loan Committee member Gus Westerman. The Ragosa Springs CDC organization is looking for a new executive director. Region 9 will continue to help fund the position through its COVID recovery grant, as well as continuing to assist with grant applications. The La Plata Economic Development Alliance hosted an economic settlement on the 21st, which was well attended. And in Montezuma, the county has put together an economic development team, including county planning staff, representatives from the 3 municipalities, Region 9, and other key stakeholders. They meet at least monthly and is moving a variety of efforts forward. And the Colorado Workforce Board is in the process of simplifying their board-appointed process. And businesses interested in being on the board will no longer need to be officially appointed to the board by LaPlata County, and it can be appointed by a majority vote of the current board. So Region 9 has been busy. Next report would be CDOT TPR.
That's scheduled for tomorrow. I haven't seen a packet come through. I don't know if they're gonna have a meeting or not.
Okay, and the Montezuma County Commissioners meeting is tomorrow night. It's the second Tuesday.
Joel's not here, so.
And what?
Joel's not here.
Commissioner update, Commissioner's meetings is not here, so.
Oh. Okay, yeah, sorry. The next item on the agenda is discussion and action items. And the first one is public hearing 2022 on our budget introduction. Heather.
I don't know if you want to open the public hearing or if you want me to do my report first or how do you like to?
Let's do your report first and then I'll open the budget.
So I included the draft budget for you all. This includes operating and capital based on our conversations over the last few months. Operating in all funds is balanced, and I included in the cheat sheet that I give you guys. The general fund is balanced to, actually they're all balanced, and then the capital projects are also included on that cheat sheet for you guys. This budget does not reflect grants that we've applied for but haven't been approved for. So it may continue to change. This budget also is very conservative on revenues and expenditures. We will tighten up numbers as we get closer to the year, but revenues are estimated really low until I get closer to the end of the year, until I receive the final certification values from the county, until we get mineral lease and energy impact estimates and that type of thing. So things may change. However, the operating budget will always be balanced. And our next budget workshop will be the first meeting in November. The other thing that I included in here is our capital budget for you all, and then projects that we've talked about and agreed need to be done next year. Nothing has changed on that from our last workshop. But we are required by law to introduce the budget during a public hearing no later than October 15th of every year. So I also included the notice that was in the newspaper, the notice of public hearing that we published in the I don't know if anybody has any questions or anything that you would like me to consider before the next workshop.
I do have a question. That is just, are there any outstanding grants that you think we will hear about this year? Or are they flowing into next year?
Well, I'm still hoping to hear on the planning grant that we talked about, the planning grant for housing.
Yes. That
will allow us to then, I'm hoping to hear from that one. And there's one other one that we should hear by the end of the year. I'm blanking that one, sorry. But there is one other one that we should hear by the end of the year. And then there are a couple that we'll be applying for in December, so we won't know until next year.
Before I open the public hearing, Justin, would you please turn up the heat?
I just have a quick question under notes, number 4, it's the water and sewer tap fees include 3 taps, at 3.1%. I don't know what 3 taps mean.
Usually in our budget, we estimate 2 or 3 new taps each year in the revenue line item. So I've estimated 3 new taps for next year.
Oh, okay.
Again, that's probably low, considering the development and the development applications that I'm receiving, but we wanted to be conservative. So in the water and sewer budget and the revenue, I have included 3 new tap fees.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Okay, I will open the public hearing at 7:34. Do we have anybody that wants to speak on our budget from the public? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing at 7:34 and turn it back over to the board for any further discussion or questions.
It looks like what we've been talking about, so
The only one that threw me again is when we look at miscellaneous revenue in the general fund. You know, the budget was, you know, 1,269,000. Our actual is 440, but next year we have that. Is that part of the carryover for the bridge or?
So the 2021 budget included over $1 million in funding
Right,
for the Main Street Bridge.
for the bridge.
I have drawn down through September, 440,000 of that funding.
Right.
That's the actual. I will be submitting, for example, another pay request, and it'll be another 500,000.
Yeah, because this is just actual to date.
Correct. 2022 introduced miscellaneous revenue, the majority of it. There's other things like refunding expenses and copies that kind of, but the big revenue are the grants that we have already received that we will be carrying over to next year. The biggest one being the American Rescue Plan.
Right.
We are slated to receive over $300,000. So that is in the budget for next year because it will be a revenue that we receive.
Right.
Okay.
But we anticipate, you know, because we have a budget of 1,269,000. We anticipate expensing the majority of that, you know, because that's where it kind of gets confusing. I guess proposed, you know, would be nice to see, you know, because right now, if you look at it, what we spent and what we budgeted are very different. But we anticipated spending that, you know, close to that
I
amount.
wrote that entire amount down. The way that my grant
Sure.
reporting works is I report every quarter. So this week I will be submitting
For the
expenses
last quarter.
for July, August, and September.
Yeah, okay.
So next month, you'll see a giant jump from 440 to however many hundred
Right.
thousands on all of the grades. 'Cause
Right.
I do all
That's
of
what I
them.
thought. I just wanted to clarify that, you know, to make sure.
Okay, so this will be brought back to us again, so
First
we,
workshop even.
so we won't be voting on it or anything. Okay, moving right along, then we have the Live Well Retail Marijuana Business License Renewal. Heather?
Nate is here, and this is just kind of general housekeeping. It's time for Live Well to renew their annual license. Nobody has any objections. We received no state violations. The marshal's office and everybody has reviewed it and signed off on it for you guys. I don't know if Nate has anything he'd like to add. But we're ready.
I do, thank you, that's
Nate, your name and
Oh, yeah.
address. please.
Nathan Fate, 5873 Swadley Court, Arvada, Colorado, 80004.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time tonight. As always, we really do appreciate being community members of Mancos. As Heather said, we don't have any violations. We've checked all the boxes. And as far as the renewal goes, we are requesting a renewal. I also did want to bring something up. I spoke with Heather the other day to prepare her for a public announcement that was made yesterday morning at 7 a.m. And just want to update the board, let you know what's going on with Live Well, if I could. We are under contract to merge with a company called Pharmacan. None of their stores or operations are within Colorado. From the operational standpoint of things, everything will remain essentially the same. People have the same support groups from Colorado. John Lord will still be the largest shareholder of the company, and all of our upper management and senior management teams are joining the team. And just wanted to let you guys know that it is in many papers, but just want to let you guys know that. Field any questions that I could right now.
And where's the other company that you're merging with?
So that'll create the opportunity of us being in 8 states combined. So they will be, we will be in New York, Massachusetts, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois.
Yeah, so your name's gonna change, you're not gonna be the Green Kiwi, you're gonna
Everything will stay the same. Our current structure is
Similar right now, we're currently under other company called Lidwell Holdings LLC, and then all of our individual LLCs for each municipality fall underneath that. So that name, that LLC will stay the same, but the Lidwell Holdings will change.
Thanks.
So it's really an opportunity to expand.
It's an unbelievable opportunity for the company and its employees.
Great.
Because you're Denver-based, or Arvada-based, correct?
We are Denver-based, yes. Our headquarters, and as I stated, we will still be very involved in the operations of all of Colorado. We still have a number to call if we need to discuss anything or address anything.
And I see you had a soft opening.
We did. Saturday. It was awesome. So it was really good to come out. We did have our full ownership board come out and spend some time in the Mancos area, check out Mesa Verde. So we had a great time. Customer spirits were awesome. Employee spirits were fantastic. I would challenge you guys, even if you don't partake, to just go see the inside of the building. It is absolutely amazing. It's a really unbelievable work from the Campbell area group, and everything just went really well. We appreciate working with everybody in the town. So it was, we enjoyed working with all the folks, so thank you.
Do you know when you're going to have a grand opening?
Oh, it was Saturday.
Okay, because I thought that was just going to be your soft one.
We can do another one if you.
I mean, that's what I heard, the soft one would be another, I'll just ask her.
Yeah, surprise. We'll come back out, you know. But no, it was fantastic. We really enjoyed the new spot. I do think it's going to benefit both Lidwell and the town of Mancos, and it's staying pretty steady, and we're doing everything we can to work with the neighbors and make sure it's good.
I actually went in and it looks really nice.
It's amazing,
really
isn't it?
clean, professional. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
That's what we try to do. So at the end of the day, we're requesting that you approve the renewal, and again, appreciate all of your time.
And I want to say thank you for working with the community on the paint job.
The ribbons, yeah,
You know,
we didn't know that maybe the art district would, people would like the art, but we're easy to work with. We appreciate you guys
Well,
working with us, and yep, not a problem at all, anytime.
just wanted to say thank you.
You're appreciated.
Oh yeah, no, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate all of you.
Okay, then I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the renewal of the retail marijuana business permit for Green Kiwi 5 LLC, Livewell, conditional upon receiving the renewal license from the state of Colorado, and authorize the town clerk / treasurer to send approval to the state.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by trustee Denise Bryant and a second by trustee Ed Hallam to approve the renewal of the retail marijuana business permit for Green Kiwi 5 LLC, doing business as Livewell, conditional upon receiving the renewal license from the state of Colorado, and authorize the town clerk treasurer to send approval to the state. Donna, would you please call the vote?
Yes, trustee Betsy Harrison,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Frederick,
Aye.
trustee Cindy Simpson,
Aye.
trustee Ed Hallam,
Aye.
trustee Denise Bryant.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. That-
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving right along is the short-term rental discussion. And this is discussion only. So,
Cussing and discuss.
yeah, let's discuss.
Elizabeth is here.
Oh.
I'm trying to figure out my screen sharing. Aren't there some-
Come on, those girls figured it out. You ought to be able to.
I know.
Justin? Can you turn it up a little bit more?
So the-
It's cold in here.
I know, I'm freezing.
I'm freezing.
I got a down coat on. It's so
Put some
cold.
information up here for the audience.
Maybe I'm sick because I'm not cold this time.
I'm trying
Must
to-
Really?
My hands are just
Uh-oh.
like ice.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, my hands.
Oh, we're gonna watch Hulu?
Yeah.
No, I think if we're doing short-term rentals, we're on HGTV probably.
That's a good one.
Mary, let me know when you get to
We will. I gotta thaw out first. I'm froze.
Hey, there we are. There's the top.
Hello.
Okay. So, a little bit of background before she starts. We have a moratorium in place on short-term rentals, so that we can figure out if we want to regulate them, how we want to regulate them, what we want to do with them. Before the moratorium, there were absolutely no regulations whatsoever on short-term rentals. I think Dolores is going through it, if they haven't already, the county's going through it. So they've become kind of a hot topic, discussion item. So we did put a little bit of a moratorium on this for 180 days until we could figure out what direction, if any, the board wanted to go with. Elizabeth helped us with our overall land use code change a year and a half ago. And there you go. So she is going to help us with this short-term rental discussion as well. And if you choose to move forward with regulation, it needs to go to P&Z. So I would say when you're having your discussion and thinking your thoughts, please keep in mind the things that are super important to you, because we're going to want to give P&Z some direction when they receive this item for discussion and research.
Thank you, Heather. Good evening, Mayor and trustees. I'm Elizabeth Garvin. I'm with Community Recode in Denver. I haven't seen you guys since COVID. It's good to be here. Nice to be out here. So, as Heather said, we worked together to do the code a couple of years ago, and this issue is exploding across the state, right? We're bumping into all of a sudden people who don't have to work in their offices anymore that want to be in some of the more beautiful places in the state, and a really tight housing market, and investor-led purchases for both our housing and our short-term rentals. And so a number of communities, as Heather said, are thinking about their short-term rental regulations. So when we drafted this, and it was adopted in 2019, we took a pretty laid-back approach to it. Your current regulations allow short-term rentals as an accessory use to a full-time owner-occupied residence, and it's not allowed elsewhere. So in terms of what's going on in Mancos, you're actually in pretty good shape. You don't have a lot of toothpaste to put back in the tube, so to speak. I understand from Colorado Municipal League, other communities will be doing some more serious rollbacks. They're talking, I think in Telluride, about going from 800 to 400. And so that has a different impact than what we're talking about right now. But we wanted to get your guidance first before we start drafting, because we start drafting short-term rental regulations and we all get lost in the details of the code language, which gets complex. And so we wanted to make sure that we took a minute to walk through some of the higher level ideas, and you can point out what's important to the town, what's less important to the town, and then we'll take that and turn it into the draft updated regulations and check back and see if we hit the things that were important, or if we want to retool it. So the information that Heather shared in the packet just has a list of ideas in different categories. Oh, we just got small there. Can we get big again? Yeah, there we go. Thank you. And none of these are exclusive, but I will ask if we can go through each category, and if there are any particular ideas in the category that you think are important to us to focus on in the drafting, if you could let me know what those are, and if there are things that really aren't relevant to Mancos, or if you want to add to the list. Yes?
I guess my question to start with, it would be nice for us to know, because we all went through the land use code, what exactly is our criteria for short-term rental now? Is it just, as you said, is it, what is it? Is it one paragraph? Is it multiple paragraphs? Is it short, sweet, or long and lengthy?
It is, I would go with medium. And I believe that the town is using a licensing process. And I think that it is pretty easy to come in and get a license. I don't know how well we are linking the licensing to enforcement on the property. And I don't know that the regulations reflect some of the concerns that you might see about pressure to convert some of your pretty limited commercial to residential. Some of the ways that we're seeing in other communities, people are building in what becomes short-term residential. So Heather, can we put it in the packet? Can we scroll down to that accessory use table that's maybe about 6 or 8 pages
So
in?
Elizabeth, I'm concerned, you mentioned that we're
Thank
pretty okay right now because it's owner occupied and then the ADA. But we are seeing a lot of investors come in and buying houses.
Yes.
And doing the short-term rentals and not living anywhere. Non-occupied, not living anywhere. And that is not in our code.
So it's a code violation.
So.
Okay, that was my question, because that, like, she brought up exactly the point that I was trying to get to.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's what we're seeing is, as they're coming in and they're renting them maybe for 3 months.
Yeah.
And then we don't have anybody here. And they're renting out the big house because that's what they're buying.
Mm-hmm.
And then they might put another house in the back, and then they've got 2 houses that they're renting out,
And still
don't live anywhere near here. And
Right.
it's the investors that are coming from New York, California.
So, yes. And so the way the code is currently drafted and the way that I understand that we're doing it through a licensing process, one of the things that we want to talk about is, do we want to switch from a simple license to more of a permit process? Does someone need to come in and get a special use permit? Do they need to come in and present themselves to you guys and say, this is what I'm going to be doing? Do you want to hear more about what's going on potentially on these properties? And does that link back more clearly to some of the enforcement mechanisms that you have in the zoning code, in the land use code?
Now, is that going to, because, again, we had a lot of flack, and I'll just use Livewell as a situation, because we had a private property, and they sold it, they wanted the town to stop the sale of that property. We can't really stop a sale,
No.
or can we, of somebody's house and tell them what they can do with that house. So
Yeah.
are we in violation when we do that? That's my.
We're not looking to stop the sale of private property. And that's not the understanding that I have. But
No, we don't want to stop it.
No, but you do have enforcement mechanisms in your zoning code, in your land use code, if someone is using a property in violation of the code. So previously, before we put the short-term rental regulations in place, when people were doing short-term rentals, they were technically violating because the code didn't say they could do it. But that was before it had become such an issue. So what we want to do is make sure that as you go through this code update, that you very clearly linked the fact that you can't do this, you are violating, and we will enforce, and then you can start doing the daily fines or take someone to court. You have, a whole list of things you can do to enforce the code. You can do that now because they're violating the code. We think that we can make some amendments to the code to make it even more clear that it may be that the licensing process just isn't enough, that to link it back. But you guys could enforce. I mean, you could say right now to those people, sorry, you're violating the land use code. You can't do this. And they are violating, and that's your call. So I guess one of the questions as we get started is...
But again, are they violating if they don't have the ADA in the back? They're just renting out.
Yeah, they're violating.
Yeah.
Yes. They are, if they are not owner occupied and they're doing short-term rentals as the primary use, they're violating.
Okay.
So let me back up.
And short term is less than 30 days, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes. So let me ask if your preference is to think about keeping the code as is, but turning around to the town attorney and say, let's prosecute. let's tell somebody they're violating the code and see where it goes.
I think there's no point in having a code if you're not gonna enforce it, so I'm all for enforcement. We have a code, we worked really hard on it as a town, and we need to enforce it.
Yep.
Otherwise, what's the point? We
Yep.
just spend a lot of money for nothing.
But I hear what you're saying is that we could not change the code at all. We could just enforce what we have now, but that seems to me would get very costly.
So the issue that Mayor Bars points out is enforceable right now. There are some other issues that may come from the pressure of this hot housing market that we may want to change the code to cover. Because on the table that we were on a minute ago, I believe we allowed in the downtown mixed use and the commercial mixed use, short-term rental as a special use. So somebody could start trying to turn some of your commercial into a residential and then come in for a special use permit to use that as short-term rental. And so that might be one gap we want to fill. But we already have a problem that's covered by the code. So the question is, how do we want to do that? Do we want to try to beef up the code at all? I think you could go enforce now. You would need to sit down with the town attorney and work through the facts of each individual property to make sure that you can support what you're saying. The question is, do we want to close any other gaps that we think might be problematic, because we're seeing such pressure in town from people wanting to buy and put in more short-term rentals. So I'm sorry I didn't clarify those both in the first place, and I appreciate you pointing out the current problem and then the future problems.
Did Dolores put a cap on the number? Did they end up doing that?
They did put a cap on the number. So Dolores adopted a cap of 20 short-term rental permits in standalone units or in residences. If you want to rent, like if you have an extra bedroom, that some people do Airbnb for an extra bedroom, they didn't cap that because you still have the owner living in the house for the most part.
But do you?
I'm sorry?
But do you?
But do you? Yes, I think that's the problem that we'll be chasing through this whole thing. Where is that owner living?
Because I see that advertised all over that I'm renting this house and I've got an extra bedroom. Do you want to share the bedroom? You want to share the house and pay rent on the bedroom. So, and it's not the owner, it's a renter.
Yeah.
You see that all over on Facebook.
And that, I think, is illegal in some, I know that is in Durango.
It's all over in Durango.
Yeah, and it's, if they catch them, they're fined.
Right, so Durango is the home of the, how do we separate and limit the number of short-term rentals? So your bigger neighbor nearby is doing that pretty well compared to some other communities across the state. So if that is something that we want to add to the regulations, a total cap in the end, that is something we can do. Was in Dolores last night and I learned that they capped at 20 and they are at 24 applications already. So it was a number they weren't sure they were going to hit and they hit it pretty fast. So let's back up and go through some of these purposes and things we could do in the regulations, and then I'll bring us back to the question of where do we want to start. So in this list, these are all the things that we can accomplish with short-term rental regulations, and we can choose to try to pursue any or all of these purposes in the regulations. So we can ensure that our traditional residential neighborhoods are not turned into tourist areas.
Just down.
Yeah. We can maintain the viability and affordability of owner and renter occupied residential housing. That's long-term renter occupied. Those are people who live here all the time. And again, we can say all of these, you can say, yes, these are all the things that we're shooting for, and we'll use this to guide a redraft if that's where we decide to go. We can protect existing commercial structures and spaces from investment pressure to convert. We can prevent the creation and use of pseudo hotels in residential neighborhoods. And some of this, in theory, the current code is stopping. And I guess, one of the things when Heather and David and I talked about this a couple weeks ago is whether or not the town wants to enlist the help of one of the professional organizations that does compliance. So I think host compliance, I think you have someone local in Durango, don't you?
They went through Region 9 and went through the state program. I'd have to do some research.
Research, yeah.
Or if you wanted some info, I could do some research on it. But yeah, there's some.
So there are companies that will comb the listings and tell you who's listing illegally and what they're saying, and that service, I think, I understand they tend to pay for themselves through the permitting fees, so it may not be at much extra expense to the town. So just understanding what's going on out there may be helpful in the decision-making process. Ensuring that short-term rental owners maintain compliance with the land use code, supporting the property values of all the properties in the neighborhood, not just those lots with short-term rentals, minimizing public safety risk and the noise, trash, and parking problems. Those are the three big problems that we see reported most frequently with short-term rentals. Giving permanent residents the option to occasionally use their properties to generate extra income from short-term rentals, as long as the other policies are met, and protecting the health, safety, and general welfare of the community.
So when you're talking about number 8, you would say, like, if you have a permanent resident that lives here and they got a job for 6 months in New York, they could rent out their house for 6 months with the contract that they're coming back to us.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, because that's a long-term rental.
That's a long-term.
So they could do that as a long-term rental. We could say, we could look at what we define as permanent owner occupancy. There are many communities that define that at between 6 and 8 months. So if you have snowbirds and they come and go, you can let them rent their property. It's a question about whether you let them do short-term rentals during the whole time they're not here, or whether you say it has to be more than a 30-day rental. But we can kind of slide the scale on what owner occupancy is. And then the other thing that could happen in 8, that comes back to the, are you renting, the space over your garage, or are you renting that extra bedroom? Both my kids are in college. I suppose I could rent out their rooms to help pay for the school. I don't know. But so those are some of the goals, and this list is oriented towards my understanding that we want to have a little more regulatory take on this, not a little more hands-off take on this. So if I have led this in the wrong direction, it's a great time to say, no. Okay. Was there anything on this list that you felt was of more importance than the rest of the list? Or do we want to try to hit most of these purposes and give you back the regulations and see what they look like?
I like all of them.
I like all of them, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the whole point of us doing the ADUs and approving that and increasing density in our neighborhoods was because we wanted affordable housing for people that were going to live here.
Right.
And I don't want them all snatched up for short-term rentals because that defeats the whole purpose of having ADUs.
I think that kind of summarizes where a lot of communities are right now. Yeah.
Could you
Yeah.
just clarify one thing? You said something about tightening up the permit process, and you said license versus permanent.
Mm-hmm.
What are the differences?
So a license is typically much easier to get. I think they would probably come in and pay their fee and have a license.
Right now, it's just a business license.
They just fill it out and pay the fee, and that's it.
Are we doing any inspections on the properties? No. So we don't know the space or what's going on there. So it is set at the simplest level right now.
Right.
So you could identify all of the licensed ones in town.
You know, because in here it said, you know, certain requirements that need to be met. Right now, we're not inspecting them, we're not verifying the insurance and those simple things
Yep.
that do become important
Yep.
and that are in here already. So I think, you know, I mean, a permit process makes a little more sense, and it particularly, in my opinion, for some of these, is to ensure that they are safe. And,
Yeah.
you know, that we're not renting out someone's basement that doesn't have it.
Yeah, fire safety is your big
issue.
issue, exactly.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
that would be, you know, not, I don't know if we have that, but I mean, that would be, you know, safety concern.
Yeah. If we have 20 licenses in town right now, can we go around and convert those to permits and tighten it up, or are they grandfathered in?
No, a license typically doesn't give you a right to continue it forever, like a vested right in a property development would.
So it might have a true one on it.
Yeah, how, do they renew annually? So they only have it for a year. So most communities, whether they license or permit, they make you come back in every year and re-permit. So if you have some short-term rentals that, if you set a cap and you had more than, you had more existing than you actually wanted to allow, we could figure out a way to give them a year or two to transition into a sale or a longer-term lease. But that would be something that would be yours to choose. Yeah.
Heather, how many do we have?
I think we have about 12, 15.
Licensed?
Licensed,
Licensed.
and then
I know.
20 or 30 that.
Yeah, because I know if you look on Airbnb,
Well, we
there's
do.
multiple that
We
aren't.
did, at one point, we were on Airbnb, that's how we got the ones that we have. But it goes back to time, to check Airbnb every day, every week. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So we do occasionally, or did occasionally, get on Airbnb, we already have done it. She spent a ton of time identifying those that were advertised. And,
Yeah, just as recently as like 2 months ago.
yeah, so.
But that
we're-
defeats our purpose, the Airbnbs, because we're wanting housing, not
You know, we kind of,
motel rooms. You know, and that's what an Airbnb is, that people stay there a couple nights, 3 nights, and move on, but we need housing.
and it goes both ways though, you
May
know.
I ask you a question? Okay, so you say you want housing, but if property doesn't belong to you, why do you get to decide whether it's, you know, housing or something else, you know? Because I mean, a person can rent their property long-term and get $1,000 a month. And with a very good chance that their property will be trashed by renters. Versus a VRBO, you can easily double that, especially when you have some things murdered or whatever. And I mean, I know a lot of people who have them, and their properties won't get trashed. They make more money. They take them out. Everyone I know takes very good care of their property.
Yeah, it's a struggle
Yeah.
for the fact that, you know, we also like to have tourism here. You know, I mean, I'm just gonna throw the RV park. We love the fact that they're here and that they're spending money in town they're bringing money to town to spend, so to speak. Airbnb does the same thing, the RVO. It follows in the same suit, but we're kind of, you know, we're loggerheading ourselves because we want more housing for everyone. But at the same token, we don't want to, you know, at least in my opinion, I don't think we want to stop the Airbnb because it still brings a value to the town. So, you know, how do you get that balance? I think the biggest point here is to not degrade the neighborhood. You know, I have a friend that lives in Durango, and there's 12 people in the subdivision. 2 of them are permanent owners. All the other 9, the other 10, because there's 12, are all bought by people out of town that never go there, that strictly Airbnb them. And he says there's no sense of community in that, and it's a small subdivision.
Well, and it can be a nightmare for the people that.
He said it is, because people don't.
But what about what is the difference then between, if you're talking community, because we live in Black County, the difference between that and houses that are empty almost all the time because the owners won't come.
Well, but then there's zero impact to the neighborhood. So if I live next door to an empty house because the neighbors, the people that own it come 3 or 4 weeks a year, I have no impact on me, But if there's new people in there every night, that's a massive impact on me and my property rights. So we do have the legal authority to do zoning and issue land use permits and things like that. Every municipality and county does in America.
Well, no, I recognize.
Yeah.
It's striking that balance.
Like we've taken a lot of VRBOs in other places, and I know quite a few people who own them. And you're going to have to show me the negative impact, because there's an occasional person that'll take the trash out.
Well, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, and I think
we're looking at
we're in such a housing shortage, that's why we're having this discussion, because.
I still don't understand how private properties.
Yeah,
well, because, it's a commercial use. It's a commercial use of a private property, and just like we do zoning for a store, we do zoning for a commercial use. So when you get into short-term rentals, it's not a residential use. It's a commercial use. And we regulate whether or not commercial uses can happen in residential neighborhoods. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you. This is the discussion. This is it. So let's talk about what outcomes, if we redraft the regulations, what outcomes the town might be interested in pursuing. So the first one on the list is information. So you currently know through the licensing process that the rental property should be registered, and you can identify where they're located. So typically when we go through a more extensive process, we do require the owners to provide information about how to contact them. And I am sorry, I didn't pick up the license before we came in. Heather, I'm sorry, do we do, like, you have to have a local contact and everything? Okay.
Not a local contact, but it does require contact information on the business license application.
Okay. So we get a little tighter when we go into more of a permitting process. You need to usually have someone within 30 to 45 minutes of the property who is available to take care of emergencies and handle whatever goes on the property. So I think 1 and 2 kind of overlap, identifying which properties are used to short-term rentals to ensure compliance with the land use code, which this is challenging for a lot of communities. Enforcement is the harder part of zoning. And so when we get a little further down the list, we'll talk about some of the things that the town can consider to enhance the enforcement. But we want to make sure that we can, scroll back down, thank you, that we can take care of no, not yet, sorry, I'm sorry. We didn't do enough rehearsal before we set up for this. And then finally, some communities do notify neighbors of the potential use of the property as a short-term rental. Not set up so the neighbors can decline the short-term rental, but so that they know that if something happens on the property, there should be a contact person and they should be able to use that number just as well as the renter or whoever's on the property. So informationally, I'm going to stop there and ask, do you get enough information out of the license process? If we needed to go into enforcement, do you feel like, does your staff have enough information? No, so we'd want to enhance the information that comes in so everyone has a place to contact and knows what's going on the property. Okay, let's scroll up. So mitigating neighborhood impacts is one of the things that we can do through the regulations. You guys already, number one at the top of the list, and the code says that the homes need to be owner occupied in permanent residency. Yeah.
Sorry, I have a company that I use.
Yeah.
And they interpreted it differently.
Okay.
They interpreted it, if there's an accessory use, it has to be owner occupied. But if it's a only use,
Yes.
buying a house on Grand Avenue,
Yes.
for example, it doesn't have to be owner occupied. So that's what we've been
That's
licensing.
problematic, yeah.
So that's what we've been licensing. Now, we've been licensing them, not permitting them. So I think we may be able to address that.
Yes.
With some, within 3 to 5 years kind of language. But
yeah.
So for myself personally, when we come out of this process, I think at the very top of this section,
yes.
we can clearly say allowed, not allowed.
Yes.
And
yeah.
whether it's a chart, whether
yes.
it's a whatever.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because I've been giving a different interpretation, and I will say staff has changed at my consulting company, like 3 times since our land use code was updated.
Okay.
So that's something else.
Okay, so that's clarity we can add to the regulations, because if it's in the accessory use table, it's not the primary use.
Well, and that's why I'm thinking, if of those 12,
yeah.
4 of them would not comply if we go in this different direction. I would want to clarify that as well. Can those 4 remain until there's a change in property owner kind of thing?
Yeah.
Or, how do we address that?
I said, yeah, no, that's a fair question.
So just something for us
yeah.
to,
so it's a,
us to keep in mind.
Yeah, okay.
Depending on what direction the board wants to go in.
Okay.
Because if they go in the has to be owner occupied accessory use direction, I'm going to need to work with you on.
Okay.
I just want to bring something up. I've been in Airbnbs where the owner lived there until it was rented.
Yep.
And then they moved out. And we had it for the period of time that we were there for the event, and then they moved back in.
Yes, that's
a owner permanent occupied. Yeah, that's a different scenario.
That's one of the places where, if we go back to the conversation, that we can define owner occupied as something less than 365 days a year.
Yeah. Then
you can do that. So we can say, 3 months out of the year, you can slide out of the house for the weekend. Yeah. You can let people rent it. It's not a black or white. It's a sliding scale. And so I think the question is, at what point do we lose what feels like a neighborhood, right? That's Trustee Simpson was saying, is at what point does it become a hotel? And then it's a commercial use, and we've changed what's going on. So it doesn't have to be 100%, and that's something that we can talk about. And I think we've got that when we get down the list, but don't scroll. Thank you. Okay. So other things that other communities have done, limited the total number of short-term rentals permitted in a multi-unit residential structure. So to the extent that you're going to see more townhomes or more apartments in Mancos in the future, we have certainly seen in Denver that there are entire housing units that are purchased by companies that run short-term rentals. And so that model works in Denver. It may not work here because you might want a lot of that housing for local residents. But you might say 20 or 30% of the units can become short-term rentals because it is a different neighborhood in a townhome or an apartment. That's something that we can talk about. Okay, now let's scroll up. So we can talk about, we have the idea of setting a cap. And there is kind of the option of setting a cap, and there's the option of setting limitations in neighborhoods or parts of town or by zoning district. And then you could do both if you want to. But it could be that we look around and we say, well, we don't know how many we would anticipate would be the right number. And we think it's okay to continue doing the ADUs in residential districts. And maybe it's okay to do, 1 or 2 units in a multi-unit building. And then we kind of let that play out over time. So we have given you some geographic information at the end of the, let's scroll. Let's look at the pictures. This is easier to understand when we look at it and have sort of the visual to help us here. So different communities have handled this different ways. So here is Durango. And so Durango does spacing by block segment for the most part, which would be something you could do in the core of Mancos, but maybe couldn't do outside of the core. So you could say, one house on each side of a block facing each other. One house can be a short-term rental, or 2 houses can be a short-term rental. That's one way that communities have tried to keep the integrity of the neighborhood while balancing out the idea that some short-term rentals are still what we want to see. So let's go to the next one. Here's New Orleans. I realize that you guys are so very similar to New Orleans that this is probably just a bad example. But they were looking at changeable numbers by block based on the type of neighborhood. So if you turn this into your core is the blue part. So they said, because they're very visitor oriented, unlimited in the core. But then as you get out into the residential neighborhoods, the pinks and the oranges, they allowed fewer per block. So we have maps of Mancos. If we want to go to this sort of level, this we can do. And just FYI, in case you're New Orleans fans and curious, they backed away from the unlimited. Even New Orleans decided there was a too many place. So next one. South Lake Tahoe, again, pretty visitor oriented. They are looking at or looked at allowing most of their short-term rentals along their main corridors. So where it would feel more commercial, where it would be more commercial, that's where they felt like they could have the units turning over frequently. Now, we point out a different way that South Lake Tahoe did this than the other two. They changed out the permitting process. So if you're in a red zone, it is a simple permit like the license that you guys are doing. If you're in a yellow zone, it's what they're calling a discretionary permit. We may let you, we may not let you, and you're going to come in and talk to us about it. So that was the approach they took. Okay, so let's scroll up. Las Vegas. So theme here is very tourist-oriented communities because we're looking at, so they have a 660-foot spacing requirement. So 660 feet in all directions, most likely measured along the street or the frontage of the property. So you can see how they get spread out. The big blue zone on the left is kind of their no-fly zone, no short-term rentals in the blue zone. So they took some parts of town and said, you just can't do it here. Everybody else is split up by spacing. Let's do, I think we have one more, Heather. There's Traverse City, Michigan. And they chose zone districts. And so all of the Halloween districts, the orange with the black dots, those are allowed short-term rentals. And you'll see that's a C2, that's a commercial district. And then I think in also there's C1, they're light blue districts. They allowed it. So they said that it's a commercial use. It fits more into a commercial area. And then let's look at Newport, Oregon. So along the coast. And they divided it by proximity to the water along a highway, which, more, they allowed more short-term rentals closer to the water and fewer short-term rentals on the other side of the major highway in the neighborhoods there. So I'm not recommending any one of these as a particular way for Mancos, but I wanted you to be able to see the different ways that communities do this. They may also all have a maximum cap because you can mix and match those things. But if this is something that you want to regulate with more specificity, we can come at it a bunch of different ways. Do you have questions about any of these images? Did they make sense to you guys? Okay. I'm sure they made more sense than me trying to describe them. let's go back to information. Thank you, Heather, so much. You're an awesome Vanna White on top of all your other jobs.
She can scroll to the best of them.
Oh, really? I'm so impressed. I knew she had mad skills. I just didn't know this was one of them. Okay. So all of these 3, 4, 3 and 4, and then on the next page, I think, and you don't have to go there, we have a cap, are asking, is this something we want to think about as we balance, right? Short-term rentals in neighborhoods. Do you want the P&Z to come back with a recommendation that says, here's how we distribute them? Or do we want to say more along the lines of, we have X number of housing units in town. I don't know the number off the top of my head. Would say 600, let's make that up. Other communities in Colorado have looked around at the number of units they've had, and they have said somewhere between roughly 2 and 5% is what they'll allow to turn into short-term rental. And then that number, that increment, can kind of go up as you add housing. So if we put a cap of 20 and you added a new subdivision of 25 units, they probably would have lost the window on those 20. But if we say it's 2% or 3%, then it goes up with the total amount of housing that you have. So that's another way to do it. And I'm sorry, Heather, can you go to the first table? We put 2 tables in here. Nope, keep going to the one that looks more like an Excel table. There we go. So this is a very unscientific survey done in 2020 of how some different communities across the state have regulated short-term rentals. And if we scroll down just a little bit, we'll see Manitou Springs has a 2% limit of the housing stock. Palisade does a 3% limit of the housing stock, and Salida 3.5% limit of the housing stock. And Salida did it a little differently. They did 3.5% of the housing stock, and they said, we're not going to put maximum limits on the commercial. They've got a lot more commercial than you do in Salida. They've got a lot of commercial. So that's not a big issue for them. So this is in your packet also. I know that we're coming at you with a lot of information, so you can walk away later and kind of look at this. And if at any point in time you want to know, how does Fruta do it, or, how does Vail do it, or whatever, if you'll shoot an email to Heather, we'll get that information back to you. If you're curious about how someone does this in another community, we can look. If you'll scroll to the next page, we have a second chart in there, and Colorado Municipal League shared this information. It's from 2017, and I would say that probably some of these have changed since then because they're changing a lot right now. But this is one of the first studies done in the state was done by a consortium of ski towns because they wanted to understand sort of the range of the regulations. And this is a summary that came out of that. And it looks like Fort Collins might have contributed to it also. So this is background information for you guys to kind of see the range of how short-term rentals are regulated across the state.
I have a question. So when we say short-term rentals, we're including, whether it's a whole house or a room in a house or an ADU unit. So
when you
we haven't yet specified.
We haven't, right now we have specified that it should be an ADU in Mancos.
Oh.
In these tables, you'll see if you go through them that they specify short-term rental either by the amount of time that you stay there or where it's located. They have different range of definitions. One of the things that we know we're going to have to do is expand the definitions to help everybody make their way through the code. So we will end up defining what a short-term rental is for Mancos.
Okay.
And then where a short-term rental goes, and then how many people can do that.
Okay.
Okay?
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go back and see if we can get through the rest of the stuff in that. There we go. Nope, yeah, I'm sorry. Let's go back to the one more page. One more page. There we go. Okay. So some of the things that we've touched on, you'll find in here. So do we want to limit the total amount of time a property is allowed to be a short-term rental? So some communities say you can do it for 2 weeks of the year, or you can do it over summer or holidays. As you can see, as communities have tried to work with this, they've gotten creative in trying to balance out what the short-term rental owners want to do and what the town thinks is to the town's long-term benefit. Some communities have imposed a minimum stay. Many communities limit the opportunity for the creation of party houses by setting a maximum occupancy. So that's usually 2 people per bedroom or no more than about 10 people total. There are regulations that require parking, that set signage limits, that ensure that the rental units meet life safety requirements. There are communities that do quiet hours and compliance with outdoor lighting regulations. You have most of this stuff in the land use code. So the goal would be just to make sure that we're enforcing. So if we go down to protect housing affordability and availability, this is one of the big topics that we're wrestling with. So some communities for new housing are asking that there's a prohibition on short-term rentals built into deed restrictions, particularly for housing that's coming in as affordable. But we're seeing more and more communities, if not limit the short-term rental, at least limit new housing to resident housing. And so to move away from some of the investor-owned housing, that comes through as a deed restriction, right? So we don't do that in the code, but if someone is coming through the code for subdivision or rezoning approval, that's an opportunity for you to talk to them about deed restrictions in the future. Some communities cap the total number of short-term rental units in the town, and so that's something that we can talk about. How do we set a cap? What are we looking at to set a cap? And then one of the things that Dolores ended up spending a lot of time on is establishing the cap by unit type. So if they're, do you do it on the number of bedrooms in the house, the number of units in an apartment building, how do you want to break this up, and then where do you want to set a cap and where do you want to leave it unlimited? Getting to the end of our list here, some communities want to monitor the fiscal impacts. So we want to make sure that you're collecting whatever taxes are available to the town. So that could be lodging or transient and occupancy tax. Some of your taxes do go to support your chamber, I believe. Is chamber? No, it's that tourism, right? Yeah.
The county receives the lodging tax,
Okay.
and then they can allocate it to the chamber with very little regulation. It's pretty much up to the county's discretion.
What they do with that? Okay.
And as a municipal town, we can't enact a lodging tax, because I asked our attorney about that, so that we could guarantee that our chamber or our visitor center.
No. Okay.
We don't have a tuition tax. We can't do a lodging tax.
Okay. So that's kind of out of our control. For enforcement purposes, we can establish fines specific to short-term rental properties. Some communities do habitual offender fines. And so if you're trying to enforce against somebody for the 3rd time, the fine might be tripled at that point. And so that is something that is intended to deter violation of the regulations. Some communities limit the availability of permits being issued to corporate investors or non-full-time residents. We do have some of that language in the current regulations, but I think we would bring that a little more front and center if we were doing a permitting process. And then finally, so last bit, permit and enforcing, which is one of the most challenging things about short-term rentals, but definitely something that communities are very interested in doing. So we can set up the regulations so that everything is renewed annually. In addition to that, we can set up the regulations so violators can have their permits or licenses revoked. There would need to be a process for it. You don't want, not that Heather would ever have a bad day, but if someone came in and she's like, "You're out, no more," we would set up a process for that. But that is, part of kind of that full range of we've got an eye on this and we want to understand how it's working. Some communities require the owner to obtain a conditional use permit or a short-term rental permit. That's kind of been what we're talking about. That gets renewed annually. We do want to do property inspection for life safety. That is a place where you just want to make sure that if someone who hasn't previously acted as a landlord or as a host has property that is escapable and that the fire department can get into. Some communities establish a performance bond with the permit. And so the way this works is the property owner has to file a $1,500 bond with their permit. And if they violate and don't cover the fine, the town can essentially cash it. It's like a check. And so to cover the fine, you take their bond, which means they don't get it back. We can do agreements. Outside of the zoning, you can do an agreement with the listing providers to collect the lodging tax, but I don't think we can do that, as Heather was just explaining. But Airbnb will work with communities. They will work with communities to tell you who's violating and to do the tax collection if that's something your community can do. Let's see, we can set up fines for licensed users violating the regulations, and we can set up fines for unlicensed users for listing violations. So usually that's how people get caught doing this. They've listed and that they don't have a permit. Many communities require you to put your permit number on the listing, so pretty quickly if they have or haven't. We talked about hiring an outsourcing company to comb listings for violators. We can use a permit to establish the contact information. And we can also require renters to sign acknowledgments of the short-term rental ordinance requirements. So it's not all on the property owner. Typically when someone calls in a problem that's going on site, it's the renter. The bigger picture might be the property owner shouldn't be doing it, but it's the renter that's bringing it to everybody's attention. So how do we kind of make sure that they are on notice of what they're supposed to be doing? Last couple things. So we may have some pre-existing short-term rentals. This was one of our conversation topics. So one of the things we would have to talk about in drafting the regulations is what would happen if where the town decided to go with the regulations means that some people won't be able to do this. And so we would make some suggestions in the regulations about, kind of an amortization period, not to cut people off cold. That's typically not what we want to do, but to say the rules are changing. Some of the people, it sounds like, will have an illegal short-term rental and some would have had a legal short-term rental. And so we can decide if we want to treat them differently based on that status and how you want to move forward. And if you want to give priority to pre-existing licensed property. So if we're going to, put the cap at 20, the people with the existing 14 or 15 licenses, do they go in spots 1 through 14 on the list? Do they get to go first before anybody else does? So last up, application permitting and renewals. We may want to talk about adding a permitting fee to cover the inspection, to cover, whatever monitoring you need to do. The program, the short-term rentals, should kind of pay their own way in the town. Other development does. When someone comes in for a building permit application, they've got to pay full fee. So one of the things to consider is some communities tack on a fee to address the impact on local infrastructure and services. If you're, it's a little more extended from where we are. But, we're talking about tap fees earlier when you guys were talking about budget. And so what does it mean if we have, generally more turnover, more people here all the time? How are they using resources in the town? And can we associate a cost with that? And is that a cost that you want to pass on? And then finally, what is your length of permit validity. So it's typically a year, but you could decide it could be 2 years, it could be 5 years. There's not a standard on that. And that's my last kind of note this evening. When we were doing the land use code, there were lots of things where I was able to say, well, you know, we set this at 6 parking spaces because that's the best practice in 500 communities across the country. The short-term rental regulations don't work that way. They're very individualized. So that's one of the reasons that we came in and said, you know, before we even get into the language of the code, these are the higher level issues that we're all going to be wrestling with if we're going to make changes to the code. So we want to talk about it at this level before we get wound about if something is a shall or a must or an encouraged or a whatever it's going to be. So we kind of wanted to leave you guys with this information, let you think about it for a little bit, maybe get back to Heather with some of your instructions and thoughts, and we'll pull that together and then get a draft going. So I have talked at you quite a bit. You've tossed in questions, we've had conversation, but are there questions that you have now? Do you need some time with it? What are you thinking? Yeah.
Could you just talk a little bit about enforcement?
I can talk about enforcement. It's, so it is in Mancos, I think one of the things you're going to want to do is get one of the outside services to handle some of it for you because it is time intensive to do that. What we want to figure out is how to fill the gap between what is really land use code enforcement and what might be police marshal enforcement, because this should mostly be land use code enforcement. And so, you know, the question is, how booked is your staff doing all the other things they're enforcing, right? And that's something we would reflect through fees. If we figure we need to beef up enforcement and, you know, do a part-time employee, perhaps,
That would be, we were just talking, because our marshal's office does code enforcement.
Yeah.
And when they're short-staffed.
Yeah.
Code enforcement falls by the wayside, because we're
Yep.
worried about people's
Yeah.
health and safety, we're not worried about weeds and trash.
But does,
So I was just looking at Justin, thinking, we're gonna need, I don't see this being any easier. I think that we have been extremely lax on enforcement. And ultimately, what we have talked about previously, and I think this conversation is we bring it forward sooner rather than later, is we're gonna need a part-time or a full-time or 3/4 time code enforcement person.
for all
Whether it's a
code,
civilian, marshal's office, or
Mhm.
we're at the point now, just in the last 4 or 5 years, where it's, we never remove regulation. We always, you know, I know, but we always add things, and we may make them easier to interpret, but the enforcement doesn't change.
right?
So, and if we're going to be doing anything other than what's happening right now, enforcement's gonna be an issue for staff. I mean, that's just,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
It's an added burden.
All the way
Yeah,
down the
we're gonna have
line from the permits to going out and enforcing it, so.
We're gonna have to, and we'll figure that out.
Right.
But I think that regardless of where this ends up, we're gonna be code enforcement.
But does not often code enforcement become a law enforcement through lack of, okay, I have an Airbnb and I'm not, screw you, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna still run it, and what are you gonna do? I don't care if I get a permit. What do you do? I mean, then it becomes a
Well, so-
martial issue.
I think,
No?
yeah,
Still a civil.
that's a
So what-
litigation issue at that point. Yeah.
So how, okay, so he says, so I'm just trying to think this out in the worst case scenario is, so I said, go ahead, sue me. I'm gonna keep doing this.
And then.
So where, how do you finally make that
Well, so
stop?
a court.
That's my question, because it's
So
always
if
puzzled
you
me.
were found guilty in a civil matter, so the court would enjoin you, they would tell you to stop doing it. You would probably have a series of fines with the town at that point that you would be ordered to pay.
Mhm.
your worst case offender, you might end up doing that multiple times. I haven't looked to see what the incidence of legal enforcement is, but I would be interested in that, and I'll go take a look and get back to you.
I just,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I hope it would never, ever come to that, but
Right.
I just, the
Right.
way things
I mean,
are,
I suppose,
you
you
can't
know-
tell me what to do.
I'll tell you right now. It will
You
come
can't
to
tell me no.
Yeah.
My property, I'm gonna do what I damn well please.
Yeah.
But they're wrong, and then
No.
they'd be in violation of a court order.
Yeah,
And if you have a per instance, and the instance is every day they were in violation, and it's like $300 a day, that's a big fine. So people need to think twice about doing stuff like that.
I don't understand that.
Yeah.
I guess because I don't break the law
Yeah.
much.
I think to bring, yeah.
I didn't say ever, I said much.
Much.
The problem is the way Ed sounds, he's not gonna pay the fines.
Yeah.
Well, but see, then they're in violation of the court order because the court orders the fine to be paid.
Yeah.
So then, they go to jail.
Then we call the marshal.
Inspection list is what we do.
Still civil, yeah, that's what I mean. That's why I was asking, does it ever become, does one become, tip the scale and become your problem? But you're saying it doesn't.
Because it's a civil.
Civil, not criminal. Okay, that makes sense.
Well, but if you keep renting, okay, so now we're really down the road, but
Yeah.
if you keep renting in violation of a court order, you could be in contempt. And that could get you some jail time.
Okay.
Okay, so that's when you could cross the line.
Heaven forbid anything like it ever happens. I'm just trying to wrap my head around because I really feel that what we have here, what I'm seeing tonight that I have not ever paid attention to before, we already have some of these tools in our chest. But because we don't understand it well, we haven't performed the duties to make sure that those have all been met. And I'm not faulting anyone, I'm just saying we just don't know any better because there's so much for us to know, us and staff, and we throw so much on staff anyway. We expect them to know everything, and it's an impossibility.
Well, and I think the other thing there is that Mancos, like almost every other, town, city, and county in the state, does not have the resources to do all the enforcement that you want to do.
And I understand.
You guys have a good solid code in place and put a lot of work into getting yourselves there. But the gap is, who's out there writing the ticket for the, bad parking or the fine for trash in the yard or, what happens in the middle there. So we can do the code and the administrative processes really well, but you guys have hit the hole. It's going to be who gets out there to see what they're doing.
Additional staff is not a necessity, it's an absolute requirement.
Can that be a contract? Like she mentioned,
Contract employee?
outside.
The problem, well, and this is kind of a different topic than short-term rentals, but the problem with code enforcement is they really have to know our code. It's somebody that has to know our code. There are sections of our code that I'm very aware of. There are sections of statute because I deal with them every day. I don't know a whole lot about code enforcement. I have to go look up the dog barking section. I have to go look up, it's there for me, but I don't know it. It needs to be somebody who lives and breathes and does it full time, our code, number one. And number two, they need to be here. They need to know what's happening. They need to have, and that's one reason why I think originally, because it predates me, the marshal's office was responsible for code enforcement. They're out driving around all day anyway. They know who's not taking care of their needs. They know whose refrigerator's been on the sidewalk for 3 days. You know what I mean? So it needs to be somebody code enforcement for all code, not just this. It needs to be a pretty dedicated, educated, full-time, pay attention, this is your main duty job.
Yeah.
Because otherwise what happens is what happens now. When we're short-staffed, they have other primary duties, so code enforcement falls by the wayside.
Takes a back
You need
seat.
somebody whose primary duty is going to be code enforcement and one or two other things, because I don't see it being a 40-hour-a-week job once we get going. But so that's why we were talking about a full-time position in his department that does code enforcement and maybe one or two other things, that's it. And the civilian staff, because law enforcement staff is impossible to find.
Yes.
Well, and it's not-
civilian staff also, because they're not coming in badged, and for the most part, code enforcement encourages compliance. They're very soft, they're neighborly.
Yeah.
So, you don't want someone coming in saying, this is how we're gonna do it. You want them to encourage compliance to get people to the right place. So it's a different set of skills.
Well, and to Ed's, like what happens when people don't comply, I think we've had maybe, I can count on one hand, maybe the number of people that don't respond to, our first or our second little, hey, we need you to do this. Most people comply.
Yeah, and I assume that 99.9% will, but I always, have to look at, look, there's Gordon Ramsay again.
I think Gordon Ramsay likes short-term rentals. I think that's really what's going on here.
So what's the best way for us to, just because the night is growing long?
Yes.
What's the best way for us to get our individual perspectives to you? Like mark up
Through Heather.
the stuff
Yeah,
you
mark
gave us
it
and
up,
give it to
share it with Heather. Yes.
And I guess there's a couple of questions that I would really love the answer to because it may dictate how or what direction we at least start in. My number one question is, do you want to have a summary? Do you want to have a number? Do you want to go by residential income? The answer is not. But if you could.
Preliminarily, if you think a cap is where we're going to go, let's put that out there. Yeah.
You should know that kind of sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
My other question is, do you want them to continue to be, do you want them to continue to be accessory use only? Or do you want to allow
the sunbirds? So do we want to open it up a little bit?
Yes.
Did I step on you? Is that what you were thinking?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Or even just any type of, do you want the owner to live on site in every single instance? Or is everybody open to, well, no, we're willing to look at non-owner occupied properties with these restrictions. If you could think about that and send that to me in the next, week or so. Because I think that's gonna kind of get us going in the direction that we want to go. We can always figure out permitting and that, but I need to know what we want to see.
Yeah, what do we want to permit?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
I know we currently have, a house that the owner's not there, that's an Airbnb. Now, how do we get these people in?
That's what I'm saying.
Depends on how we write it.
And that's why I need some information from you guys, because you may want to allow that. Maybe you want to allow one per one. I mean,
Right.
So I need to know, do you all want to require that the owner live on site, or are you open to some form of non-owner occupied?
Well, what about this one that's, it's been there for a long time?
Well,
and then, and the owner's not there, so would they get like grandfathered in? Or?
Well,
it depends on if they're there legally or not legally.
Yeah.
Well, they're there legally.
Well, and then again, it would depend on.
You assume.
I need to know if you care about an owner living on site.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yes. So depending on the feedback you guys give us, we're going to give you multiple paths forward, right? If we hear, hey, we think we can do 10 completely all 24/7 short-term rental, anywhere in town, but 10 is it. So that gives us one set. And if there are 4 houses that are already going to comply for that, then we might recommend, okay, those 4 get spaces 1, 2, 3, 4, because there was some confusion in interpreting the regulations. If you say we are not going with any full-time short-term rental properties, then we're going to have to figure out a different path for the people that were given that interpretation of the code.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So we'll take what you guys say, we'll figure out what the gist of it is, and then we'll figure out how to work with the facts on the ground too, and bring that back as a recommendation.
So those are my 2 big ones. Do you want to have and do you require owner occupancy, or are you okay with exploring full-time? SDR. So those will kind of, I think, get us started, because I know that this can go, you can basically do almost whatever you want. It's one of those things, and that's not always good.
You know, and the irony right now, like you say, there's 12, so the impact isn't huge, but the potential is, it's the potential. It's not what's here now, because, you know, you kind of sit there and think, well, you know, it's not really a big deal right now, but when you start throwing every other house.
Well, and like I said, she's not here, but I did confirm with Georgette kind of after our last conversation, about 85% of the chat transfer applications that we're seeing, because, you know, the chats go to the property owner, about 85% of them are out of state transfers. So we're seeing almost zero transfers from a Mancos address to a Mancos address. So people in this area are not, and we're not seeing like Dolores or Cortez, we're not seeing Montezuma County people moving in and around Mancos.
It's people are coming in because, you know, and honestly, a lot of those people are here to be permanent residents. But I know we've had inquiries of people that want to do this, so that's all they're looking at. You know?
And
that's more than investors.
From businesses, from like these corporations, as I'm seeing a lot of that. Corporations in Texas, corporations in California, corporations in Denver, wanting to know, oh, what are your short-term rentals? Do you have a cap on the number? What are your limits? And, you know, where I just got one again a couple of days ago. A corporation in Denver, we're looking at a property and they just use as a short-term rental. So again, maybe that's not a bad thing, but if you don't know that information, you can't decide. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
If you guys are fine with that, we draft that for you guys.
Yeah, that's why we're looking for your guidance. Yeah. The other thing I would add to that is we probably want to draft these and review them next year, right? Because we want to draft them for what we know now. The market is changing, and you know things are moving pretty quickly. So don't feel like if we draft something that's a little stricter now, and you live with that, and you say we want to allow a little bit more. We can go back in and do this again next year, and we can loosen it up a little bit. It's a little harder to crank it down. It's a lot easier to loosen it up. And so, whereas you probably don't want to look at the whole land use code every year, although as your code writer, I would tell you to look at it. You should look at this, you know, for the first 5 years, probably every year, and make sure that it is really formulated for Mancos and what you're seeing. So.
And then at some point, once we have a clear direction, we'll turn it over to P&Z, because it will have to go to P&Z.
I guess.
But I want the board to be very clear on what you wish to see, so that I can give that direction to P&Z, and we can then work on language and whatnot.
Sure, we don't want to waste our time.
Yeah. I guess the next question is, you know, because we have, you know, the ADU kind of became, you know, that's what we assumed it was, and now it's not. What of the 12, how many are ADU and, you know, units, and how many are not? I mean, we don't know.
I did not track that.
What?
I don't
You
know.
missed something? We got you on something? Wow. That's
Just
good.
between your
Mark that one down, kids.
Wow.
Gotta get to
Heather missed one. One and done. One and done. No, I just was wondering, you know, because I know that at first we all thought, you know, and that's where we thought it was going to be.
That's why we allowed ADUs.
That was part of it, you know, was to kind of, you know, it was a mixed thought in that process, was, you know, for that or for not.
Finish that sentence. I don't, you allowed the ADUs to be the short-term
That's
rentals?
one of the reasons that we allowed ADUs, yes.
Because that was one of the biggest requests.
Yes, because short-term rentals are specifically called out in our ADU, the ADU section of our code.
Okay.
They're specifically called out there.
Okay.
And that is one of the reasons that we allowed ADUs.
Okay.
And the other was to increase housing stock.
Yeah.
But that's not happening the way that we had hoped. We're mostly seeing
Short-term rentals.
So,
We were hoping mother-in-laws.
Mine's both.
Yeah.
Weird.
All right, well, if you guys could in the next week or so, just kind of send me your initial thoughts so that we can kind of work on this and, bring it back to you guys. I don't know if we can hit the next meeting. I'll have to see it, depending on the information that we get, I'll have to see if we can get it to you, but whenever, if you can get back to me in the next week or so, we will work on it and put it on whenever we need it.
Okay.
We could probably, depending on how much everyone has to say in the next meeting, we can do consolidated comments back so everybody can see what we've gathered and make sure that we're headed off in the right direction.
Just kind of like, for consistency purposes, do you want us to, you know, go through and refer to the sections and the numbers and, you know, like, you know, this section, number 2, I agree. Number 4, I
And if
disagree.
you have something that strongly agree or strongly disagree, we could start there,
Okay.
and then everything else can be kind of a consensus.
Mhm.
But I know for me personally, the 2 burning questions are, do you want to move the number? And do you, do you want to require that owner lives on site, or are you open to, having the owner not live?
See, on an ADU, it makes it real easy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's.
The other one makes it difficult.
Well,
Yeah,
not
somewhat
always,
difficult.
because
Not-
some people rent the house and rent the ADU. So,
No, oh, yeah.
so
but
they
you
don't
both.
live there. They
Yeah, but
rent
no,
both.
but I'm just saying, but it's easier to live on the house and rent the ADU than it is to live in the house and rent the house.
Well,
But people
but
do
my
that.
point
People
is
do, yeah. I mean,
people
yeah,
do.
Yeah. it works both ways.
And that's happening here
So-
too.
Or even owning the property locally. I mean, the person is in the basic area, they're still tending to the property themselves.
And
There's
that's
so many options.
Well, because that's what Montezuma County is considering, because they don't have any regulations right now. So they're talking about, short-term rental regulations, and what the county administrator is recommending is that they be a resident of Montezuma County. So they don't necessarily have to live in the house, but they have to be a resident of the county in order to have a short.
So then we wouldn't have an
I
investor.
think that would help us with one letter.
But I mean, it goes to the same, so that's why I need to know.
Yeah.
The only thing really I need is, do you want to require the owner to live on site, or are you open to other options? Because then we can say, oh, here's some options, which one of these do you like? And we can just continue to.
You don't have to move to Mancos, you just gotta move close to Mancos.
So, if you guys could reference this, tell me what you love, what you hate, if there's something.
We created, this issue is challenging, and we created a grid for it, for Dolores, so everyone could do the mix and match. I can share that with you, and then we can share that with everybody, and you could say yes, no, so it's occupied and where is it? So, yeah. Mhm.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Because then I can email it to them, we can compile their responses and bring the compilation back to the next.
Mhm.
You know, and I guess it wouldn't hurt for us to see what the whole Dolores decision. Not that I want to mimic theirs, but I would like to see how, you know, with their process. I've read Durango's and it's, you know, they're still fighting it.
They've changed it a lot.
Well, so, and we could probably get you like the videos of the 18 meetings that Dolores to do this.
How many?
I don't think so. I think it was probably closer to 7 or 8, actually. It was a minute because it's complex. It is, right? And you care about your residents and the properties, and it's a lot. It's harder than some other parts of the code. So we'll get that table over to you, and y'all can fill that in. Okay. Enough. Thanks everybody for your time tonight.
Thanks for coming.
Nice to be back.
Thank
Thank you.
you. Very informative.
Okay, the next thing on our discussion is the opioid MOU.
Scotty, you want to-
Not here.
Just tell me what I'm aware of. Sorry. So I'll just so this is a ton of information. But it's a short discussion because we have zero authority to change any of this information.
Right. Mhm. Right.
but I wanted to give it all to you guys, just kidding. So we've been talking kind of briefly, occasionally I'll update you on the opioid agreements and the class action settlement. Shaq at the county has really, really taken the lead on this for all of us, all the rest of us. And he was working with CCI, Colorado Counties, and the state and the Attorney General on what this is going to look like. Basically, what Mancos cares about is that we will receive in this class action opioid settlement, we will receive $5,400 total allocated to us over 19 years. So what I've
$1
told
a day
Shaq,
of that.
so what I've told Shaq unofficially is, well, you can have our $100 a year and do something with it. You know, you can leverage it with your however much you get, 400,000 or whatever. Because one of the things that has been being discussed by staff in the county is the complete and total lack of facilities here, anywhere close to here, for substance abuse, for that kind of thing. So we were like, it'd be great if we could all leverage our funds from the 5 regions, because Montezuma County is in with other counties as a region under this agreement. But the bottom line is, this MOU, we can either sign it or not. If we don't sign it, we're not part of the settlement, we don't get our $5,400, nothing happens. If we sign it, we're eligible for our $5,400. The only caveat to that is the class action lawsuit has a condition that says the state and everybody in the state will only receive the maximum share if enough local governments execute these MOUs.
Oh.
So, again, it's $5,400. Mancos doesn't have a huge dog in this fight, but, and I do not have a pulse. There's been things going around the manager list, but everybody's asking for information, nobody's giving information. I do not have a pulse on how many you're doing this and how many you're not doing this, and who wants it and who doesn't. I don't have that information.
Well, here's the thing, like, doing it doesn't hurt us. We might actually gain $5,400. And for the greater good, it can help set up other communities in the state to get, money.
Yes.
So I don't see a downside.
So, and I did ask, because David's not here today, I had sent this to him also, and asked if he had any suggested changes, comments, whatever. And basically he said, I've got nothing on this, you guys can do what you want.
Yeah.
So just so you know, I did send this information to the attorney. I mean, he had some comments, but at the bottom of it was, there's really nothing you can do about it. So there's no harm if the board wants to sign it. There's no harm if they don't.
Yes.
And then Justin just has a comment on this one.
So when the Attorney General was in Cortez for a law enforcement meeting, he's been campaigning around the state very hard, trying to get local governments and law enforcement agencies to see the importance of signing this. And it kind of goes with what you said, Trustee Simpson, is that what's the harm of signing or not signing, depending on how much money you get. Obviously, the Front Range is going to get way more than Western Slope, which is always the case. But he's been campaigning, trying very hard to get this for the state of Colorado.
Cool. Good to know. I mean, hey, if us signing it helps the county get $400,000, I'd say go for it.
Yeah.
Or if the region could get enough to come up with a facility.
Is there any, how you spend the money? I mean,
It will have to be spent on some type of substance abuse.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
The CIP program. The CIP.
Yeah.
That's more, I think, of a mental health.
I know. I looked really hard, and I'm like, I still am not clear with reading all of this, whether or not we could actually pay for the CIP.
From what the Attorney General said, we could.
Cool.
The problem is our county's gonna receive so little,
Yeah,
it doesn't benefit us.
yeah.
And that's been kind of the staff consensus has been what we, and it's very preliminary discussion, brainstorming kind of thing, but what we're brainstorming is banking the money for a couple of years in order to get cash match together to build, because the facility and ongoing maintenance, it's going to be, I think, bigger than anything we've seen in the county so far. Those facilities are very costly, very necessary, but we have to plan appropriately for the expenditures.
Yeah.
So it's going to be huge.
Any other questions or anything? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I move we authorize the town administrator to execute the memorandum of understanding with regard to the Colorado opioid settlement and work with the county administrator on this project.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by trustee Cindy Simpson and a second by trustee Denise Bryant and trustee Ed Hallen to authorize the town administrator to execute the memorandum of understanding with regard to the Colorado opiate settlement and work with the county administrator on this project. Donna, would you please call the roll?
Trustee Denise Bryant.
Aye.
Trustee Ed Allen.
Aye.
Trustee Cindy Simpson.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Frederick.
Aye.
Trustee Betsy Harrison.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Moving right along, we have several items on our October 27th agenda. Our workshop, we'll be talking about the design review guidelines. That's kind of tentatively at this point. We'll have our committee reports, the short-term rental discussion continued if we get information back in time. Co-working incubator space, RFP award, the Green Light event and National Hospice Month proclamations, the water and sewer rate discussion. I do want to talk about that art donation from Mel Heath. And then we talked about the meeting with Gretchen at the Conservation District on the watershed coordinator.
That'll be for the first workshop in November.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then on the water and sewer rate discussion, it's basically a recap to give one more public meeting discussion on the water and sewer rates, because we pretty much kind of figured out. And it goes into a resolution for official adoption. But that's what that water and sewer rate discussion is. If you want to have that, we can. If you feel the agenda is too heavy, we don't have to. If you have the discussion, then after the discussion, Rachel will start working on public outreach. If you do not have the discussion, then we'll just start working on public outreach. So it's up to you guys.
Does anybody else have anything else that they want to add to that?
And everybody's okay with the design review guideline discussion and workshop?
Say that again.
Everybody's okay with the design review guideline discussion at the workshop? That was, that came out of do we regulate paint color?
Okay, design.
So we're,
I did have the majority say, yeah, I'd really like to talk about that.
yeah,
And so I'm doing it now, sooner rather than later.
Okay.
While it's still fresh.
yeah, that's a good idea. Kind of dodged a bullet on that one.
Yeah, they were really.
Because they put a lot of,
accommodating, because they didn't have to.
yeah, and they put a lot of work in that. I actually thought it looked kind of groovy, but it was a bit much.
Well,
Yeah,
and
it
then
was.
they ultimately also, it was completely their offer, we didn't ask ourselves to do anything. They were the ones who initiated the offer on the role. So, they're gonna work collaboratively, and I don't know, if that's their project, but.
Yeah.
We did, so that's very nice.
And then if you guys would please get your reviews back to me by the next meeting so I can get them up. So with the first meeting in November, we can executive session for the review.
We can leave these in your mailbox in the town hall. Where do we give these
You
to?
can leave them there because I'm here every Tuesday, and if they're all 7 in there, Donna will watch it and I'll get them.
No,
And I'll watch it.
Donna, if you would seal it, if you're.
Yes, seal it.
Oh, yeah, seal it.
Yeah,
Just seal them and put them in police box.
yeah,
That's
and
what I was
I'll come over. I'm
asking.
close
Okay.
enough I can come over.
Hmm?
I'm close enough I can come over.
Come
to
on.
get 'em.
It's a long walk.
Yes, it's long. It's a long walk. So next thing on the agenda is adjournment.
Take a motion to adjourn.
So